Hello and welcome back to another episode of Red Tinted Glasses, the final episode of 2024. Phil, still no Callum, still no win for Aberdeen. I mean, things are going bad to worse, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if there was the one thing you wanted to end 2024 on, it was going to hopefully be a high. And I think once again, gut punch way to end the year for the Dons.
Yeah, I mean, it really was a kind of real kick in the stones, but I never felt we maybe deserved anything from the game, certainly in terms of winning the game. I know you were quickly writing down some of the stats, which we'll come on to as well. We'll also, before we kind of maybe take a bit more of an in-depth look at last night's defeat, we will go back to that Kilmarnock game as well. And I'd also quite like to discuss what the squad desperately needs in January, as of course the transfer window opens in about 40 hours' time. And of course, we'll also look ahead to the first home game of 2025, which sees Ross County, a bit of an informed Ross County actually, making the trip to Pittodrie as well. So lots for us to kind of digest and chew over, probably in the course of the next hour or so on this episode of Red Tinted Glasses. If you're watching us live here on YouTube tonight, welcome along. Get involved in the comments as always. We know plenty of you like to do that as well. I've also got the Twitter tab open as well. So if you follow us on Twitter, not on here, tweet us your thoughts at RTG_podcast as well. And we'll try and pick up as many thoughts throughout the show as possible. But let's start with Killy. We'll go back even more painful to Boxing Day. A 4-0 defeat at Rugby Park and a real chastening defeat, I think is probably the best way to describe it, Phil.
Yeah, it was one of those games where I was quite glad that I was otherwise occupied. So I only really caught Vassell's opening goal before I went elsewhere. But yeah, bit of an embarrassing one. I think we spoke a little bit, obviously, on the build-up episode to the Killie game about how frustrating it would be to go down and have some former Dons alumni rub it in, and rub it in they did.
Yeah, especially being rounded off, of course, by Bruce Anderson bagging the fourth goal on the day. We've also spoken about the need for change in centre back, and Angus MacDonald was afforded the opportunity to impress. Whether he did that or not remains to be seen. I didn't think he covered himself in glory for the first couple of goals. Equally, I don't think Rubezic covered himself in glory for goals 3 and 4. I think both McDonald and Malloy played well together at Tynecastle. People may be saying Rubezic is the common denominator there. Again, other people will say, kind of coming in from the cold is a bit difficult. But I thought for the Killie game as a whole, we struggled with balls into the box. Mitov looked really ropey in the first half, looked a really uncomfortable goalkeeper. But the theme of struggling with the balls into the box, I don't know about you, Phil, kind of felt like it continued a little bit yesterday at Tannadice as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I was just going to come on and say that as much as I thought that Malloy and Rubezic were actually quite good yesterday for the most part, it is that sort of thing that's came back to bite us, where it just seems to be one ball into the box or sort of one ball towards our back line, and we just seem to come entirely undone. I will say I think it was a sort of night and day compared to the Killie game. Mitov especially, I think if he wasn't in goals on Sunday, we could have been looking at 2 or 3 down. But yeah, like you say, the Kelly game, a player that was maybe rushed back, perhaps. I'm not too sure. Again, also it's tough sitting that amount of time out on the sidelines and not having, the complete match sharpness there. But yeah, I think it's getting that 90-minute performance in. I feel like at Rugby Park, we just had nothing. We didn't have quality. We didn't have any fight. Whereas, on Sunday, at least, from my perspective, there was that bit of fight there. We just didn't have any quality. So hopefully, slowly but surely, we're getting there. But I think that full 90 performance is something that's actually eluded us for majority of the season.
Yeah, and continues to elude us right up to obviously what we're speaking just now. Can't be bothered speaking about Mackenzie's performance. I'm not sure if this is in reference to the game at Tannadice or the game at Rugby Park, but the comment saying that he doesn't look interested to me, I mean, you could take from the game at Rugby Park or last night at Tannadice, and he doesn't look the player we saw in August, September time, but neither does half of this team right now, Phil. And, you know, as much as I think we are in desperate need of a striker, we're also in need of something going right with the defence, because again, on that Kilmarnock game, we've spoke for the last 5-6 weeks about the types of goals that we're conceding, but it was just error after error and soft goal after soft goal that we conceded. And to be honest, even the goal last night was also pretty poor.
Yeah, I think we say it every week. It feels like teams don't really need to work to score against us, let alone to sort of beat us at the moment. And even when we were on our good run, you know, the goals we were conceding tended to be on the softer side, in my opinion, which was a little bit frustrating. And even more so now that they seem to actually be coming back to bite us now. So yeah, I think definitely Mackenzie for me again just looks like a player that's playing with his head elsewhere. So a left back in January, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing one coming in. But yeah, I think as well. I think both fullbacks, as much as I thought Devlin was good yesterday again, I feel like they're struggling now with the way that teams are really picking up on how we like to play. United did it brilliantly, really quick wingers that sort of penned the fullbacks back a little bit. Didn't really allow them to get up the pitch as much as they normally would. So definitely something that I'm hoping we can sort of find a plan B for going forward.
Yeah, and I think on the Killer game as well, the other thing that kind of really frustrated me, because, you know, listening to what you just said there about kind of teams maybe knowing how to play against us, nullifying threats, Devlin, I heard a few people mention the kind of goal contributions or goal involvements that Nicky Devlin's had this season, and how they've drastically dropped off as well over recent weeks, along with our form. But again, I thought both Graham Shinney and Nielsen were far too similar. I'm not a huge fan of McGrath in the 10 compared to what we've seen from Leighton Clarkson. McGrath, another player that just isn't on it right now. How he lasted 90 minutes yesterday specifically, I really don't understand. And then I thought, you know, probably the only positives in the game against Kilmarnock was Topi Keskinen again, and I actually thought Duke had a decent game. But what did you make of Peter Ambrose starting? Because I know me and you were very baffled, and it was his first start for Aberdeen as well, but he definitely didn't grab that opportunity with two hands today.
No, it's a tough one because like I say, I think everybody knows that Ambrose at the moment at least isn't the answer to the sort of question we've got for the number 9 issue. But you know, I think something had to change, and I think I can kind of see what Jimmy was going for a little bit in starting Ambrose. You know, he's seems to put himself about a fair bit when he comes off the bench. You know, he's definitely quite a physical player, but I think as well going for that sort of pace in the top line. I think to try and get in behind, but we just struggled to do that. And I think part of that again is the fact that our fullbacks don't seem to be able to get up the pitch because they're you know they're so penned in with the press of the opposing team's wingers. That the likes of Keskinen and Duke aren't getting the same sort of space where, you know, Devlin, for example, would sort of drag a defender out. So I do feel bad for Peter in a way, and I think it's a tough one to have it on his shoulders to try and end the sort of winless drought by being the goal scorer. But yeah, still a bit of an odd one to see him starting, in my opinion.
And I think it also just maybe highlights how much currently we're missing Pape, because you know, when we were speaking to Stewie in the pub, he spoke about listening to an episode of Open Goal, and Andy Halliday say that Pape was the toughest player that Motherwell have faced so far because they just didn't know what to do. I think maybe because they didn't quite know what he was going to do, and I don't know if Pape knew what he was maybe going to do in some of the scenarios as well. But when he was playing, there was a lot of space being generated. Now, that was either because he was dragging defenders one way, or it was actually needing two defenders to occupy him, allowing space for a Duke, a Topi, or whoever. may have entered that area. Right now, Kevin Nisbet's not a mobile threat. Esther Sokler will run about, but as we saw last night when played clean through, what a horrible touch that was. He's not as threatening one-on-one. So we don't, as much as, some people will argue we're not creating chances for the strikers, which I would agree with. We don't have a striker currently that is probably striking any fear into a defender they're running at.
Yeah, and I think it's tough as well because, neither of Sockler or Nisbet have really had the opportunity to go on that sort of run to bag those goals, either through injuries or what may be. It seems to be when one scores, they don't follow up the next game, and then it's a change in striker. And it's probably been a little bit hypocritical because I'm pretty sure I'm calling for a change every week when we're on this podcast. But it is that a lot of the sort of attacking options that we have in this team currently, I think, are players that really rely on being in a good bit of confidence. Obviously, we've seen how good it's been for Pape when he got on that scoring streak at the start of the season. Similarly, it's sort of Tope, if he can, string a couple of good games where he's contributing together, you can tell he's that £1 million player. But when he isn't, by God, he can be a frustrating old watch. But I think striker's probably the main one. I think there's definitely going to be a few more bodies that need to come in January, more than just maybe a defender and a striker, maybe 5 or 6 players to come in. But I think striker's a main one just now. I think, being a bit of a concern, just our lack of scoring.
I suppose, folk will argue, what's the point in a striker if we're not creating the chances for said striker? And should we not then be looking at a centre-back or another defender to shore up some of the mistakes that are being made? And you can see both sides to that argument 100%. My other argument, when you go back to look at the goal from last night, is if we didn't adopt zonal marking, we maybe deal with that a bit better as well.
Yeah, I think it's a weird mix between zonal marking, but also just the fact that I don't quite know what Nilsson was sort of expecting. I don't know if he thought Ruby was maybe going to come and head it. But
do you think the wind maybe? Because the wind affected a couple of long balls that we tried to play yesterday.
It could have been, but it seemed to be like he was the only one that didn't react to it. I feel like all the Dundee United players kind of reacted. Ruby somewhat reacted to it, but I think he was already on somebody anyway. And Nilsson just seemed to get caught sort of wrong side of Kevin Holt. And it's just those little moments where we seem to switch off and just sort of, forget what's going on that are costing us at the moment. The Killie game aside, where we did get well and truly battered, majority of other times it is these sort of silly mistakes that are, causing us to concede these soft goals.
Yeah, and just as frustrating in terms of what we did at Rugby Park and how we kind of turned up after what we've seen recently. And, Jimmy Talene coming out after the game, again, scathing in his assessment and calling it the lowest point so far in terms of his tenure. And he didn't want to be back there and wanted to see a reaction when we travel to Tannadice. We travel to Tannadice, we make 4 changes to the team. Again, I wasn't maybe kind of opposed to all the changes. I'd have personally liked to see Duke retain his place in the starting lineup. I could understand why he changed the centre backs again, given the level of goals we conceded at Kilmarnock. But in terms of performance and maybe reaction, I don't really know if it was there, Phil. Like, Dundee United were very, very, very good, to be honest.
No, and I'm with you on that. I mean, I think, like I say, compared to the Boxing Day game at Rugby Park, I think you could definitely see there was a bit more fight in that Aberdeen team. Nicky Devlin in particular, going back to what we've known of him this season, where he was sort of throwing his body on the line and wearing that armband and really trying to get the team going. I was sort of near the tunnel at full time, and he was having quite a heated discussion with Nielsen on the way down the tunnel. Nicky really shown himself to be that leader that we all know he is. I don't quite sign up to the we were better than Dundee United metric, unfortunately. At least from what I was watching. A draw potentially fair, but I don't think we would have won that game on merit. Should we have
No.
somehow snatched a winner? Like I say, 9 shots, 2 on target for us, 19 shots and 6 from United. They were just absolutely peppering us going forward. And I think it was, for the stats nerds out there reflected in the XG, United should have probably scored, just over 2, and we were just shy of 1. But yeah, not the way that I think Jimmy would have been expecting it to go. I think you could tell that as soon as the ball hit the net. You sort of saw that sort of muted reaction from him on the touchline.
Yeah. Graham Gibbs saying it was miles better than the Killie game, but we created no threat. I mean, it was not very hard to be better than the Killie game, but I think that last point is really kind of how I felt, that we offered nothing in that game. You said before we came live tonight that we had 2 shots on target, and I was struggling to remember the second. That kind of tame sort of, I don't know, back heel sort of volley is how I remember it, from Esther Sokler, where Walton saves at his near post kind of towards the end of the first half. I also remember the ball flashing across the face of goal and Topi couldn't quite get on the end of it earlier in the first half. That was all I could really recall. And then when in the second half, when we actually showed a bit of composure and injected a bit of pace to the game, Duke does excellently, and then Jamie McGrath loses all sort of composure and blazes over what was probably our best chance of the game. And when it's a cutback to just inside the edge of the box being called our best chance of the game, I think that tells you how little threat we posed throughout the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's unfortunate as well, because I think if that ball falls to McGrath 3 months ago, it's probably rifled in at the top corner with the run of form that he was on. Again, is it one of those things where it is a player that's just sort of fallen out of that confident goal scoring sort of streak that he was on, or is it, like I say, a player that his head's not fully there and the concentration slips? But yeah, much like you, there was nothing to really get you going. Even when we did sort of have flashes of sort of looking like we're putting a good attack together, the ball would be given away cheaply, or Beaton would blow for a weird foul somewhere on the park, or whatever would happen, and it just kind of sapped the sort of momentum out of the move.
Yeah, and we've been speaking about. I want to kind of speak about the team in terms of how we lined up last night. Esther Sokler coming in up top. I mean, again, just another probably frustrating night for Esther. Jamie McGrath going out wide left instead of Duke. Honestly, I don't know what that was about. We've spoken about this before. The St Mirren game stands out in particular when we shoehorned both McGrath and Leighton Clarkson into the game, and one of the two suffers. I actually thought Leighton had quite a good game last night. He was always looking for the ball and looking to take us forward. I just thought everything Jamie tried to do last night didn't work. I thought Ante Palaversa was good in the middle of the park. Nielsen was okay, I guess. And then, yeah, as we mentioned, Ruby coming back in to partner Gav Malloy. I thought both of them did really well last night. Ruby, although once again picking up a stupid booking that he doesn't really need to do. I don't know if that's now him suspended. Might be.
I think he should be fine for County. I think for County it's Nielsen and I think Topi. I think
Definitely Nielsen, but I think Ruby could now be suspended for the Motherwell game.
Yeah, I think it'll be the game after.
Gordon is frantically going to tell us if that's correct or not, because I know yesterday's game was the last game before they got wiped, but of course he couldn't help himself. I guess the only thing remains to be seen was whether or not it's a precaution taking off Gav last night, because he went down holding his knee, played on for a little bit, and then Angus came on, and I thought, well, given how he played against Kilmarnock, I thought he did all right coming on. But yeah, again, it's in that forward area with McGrath on the left and Esther up top. It's just not working. And how much confidence are we maybe taking off some of these strikers by chopping and changing every week?
Yeah, and I think it's a tough position to be in as well, because I think we'll be some of the first to admit it, that as much as we love Morris, for example,
Mm.
Is he suited to be a starting winger, or is his game more effective, running at a tired fullback? That being said, probably should have came on sooner than what he did. I think I spotted a comment from somebody earlier on mentioning that I think Ryan Strain was booked. I think it was Kevin Blanchard popped it in.
Yeah.
That Ryan Strain was booked early on. And it's those sort of moments where you do sort of benefit from, the likes of Duke and Morris being on for that half an hour to just really try and run at them, draw the fouls, run at the tired legs, get the ball into the box. So, and like I said, I get why the changes came later on. I believe that because Tope is, I think, in line for a suspension for County, I think that was the reason he played for majority and didn't come off. Similarly, I think that's the reason that it was Nielsen over Shinnie, was to sort of basically give Shinnie the rest before Nielsen suspended. So, but yeah, like you say, for having such a creative player in McGrath up top, I think he really struggled to get on the ball and do anything with it on Sunday.
Yeah, I'm just looking just now. I don't see where you're finding Tope's got a suspension coming up because he's only picked up 2 bookings from what I can see here.
I'll have to consult my
But
research that I was
yeah,
doing there. Maybe it wasn't Tope.
but yeah, no, I think that's fair. Kind of explaining why Nielsen played over Shinnie, given Nielsen's suspension coming up on Thursday. But I mean, how often have we spoken about this, giving Palaver some minutes where needed, and we haven't done that? So I guess it's good in that sense that we've learned. The other comment that I brought on screen was from Sam when he said that Tope belongs on the left. Again, this was my other kind of, I didn't understand with putting Jamie out on the left. Did we have to? Could we have utilised Duke or Morris? Because as you already mentioned, certainly when Duke came on in the second half, we looked a lot more threatening. But again, it was just down the one side because the only threat down the right-hand side was Nicky Devlin. And if he was getting caught out, that left us exposed.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've mentioned it quite a few times on the show that as good as McGrath is technically, and there's no doubts that he does, have moments of magic in that right boot when he wants to. He's not quite as mobile enough on the right. I think he works best when the players around him are able to get into those pockets of space, and when Dundee United are set up the way they are, which was very well organised. He's going to struggle to have that freedom to get on the ball and pick out passes, and it's then on him to try and burn a fullback, which isn't really his skill set, in my opinion.
Yeah, I kind of agree on that as well. I know a lot of people are speaking about the subs, and I will come on to that a little bit later because I think we're still kind of speaking about the first half and how we kind of really didn't get going. We saw Dimitar Mitov called into action and he made a class double save. The reactions for the second save in particular were unreal. But the thing that confused me about that passage of play was the linesman's flag went up. He stopped. And then when Dundee United continued attacking, the flag quickly went down. And I would, had the ball gone in the back of the net, I would have been really interested to see what had happened because we've seen some interesting VAR decisions over the course of the weekend in Scottish football and, of course, the last few weeks. But I didn't think linesmen were supposed to do that anymore.
Yeah, it was like you say, I had the exact same reaction as you. I almost kind of half turned away because I was like, all right, okay, offside. And then it was just as I was sort of like half turned, I was like, Mitov is diving across his goal. And then I thought, okay, the ball's come out to Devlin, now they're going to pull it back. And then they never did. They just allowed Devlin to boot it up the park. And I never quite understood it. And it's one of those things I think annoys you about the whole, new thing they've been trying to do for offsides this past few years is, Mitov's just back from injury. What happened if someone just went clattering into him and he's injured again? And it's like, there's no need for it. But yeah, it sort of wasn't the first sort of weird refereeing decision of the evening. But yeah, that one did kind of irk me quite a fair bit.
It irked me because, as I said, like I was fully expecting when the ball came out, I don't even know who it was actually, that put the ball towards the net and before Mito's big paw palmed it away. I was going to be raging that the flag had gone up in the first place. But what enraged me even more was later on when I've never seen a referee so eager to award a penalty, he blows for it whilst falling over. I don't also know what John Beaton has seen to believe that Nicky Devlin has put his arms in an unnatural position, because, like you, I was in the Jerry Care in, other side of the halfway line, and I could even see that Devlin's arms were in by his side. I'm not arguing the ball 100% smacks Devlin in the arm. No argument about that. But what is he supposed to do in that situation with his arms? Never a penalty, but Jesus Christ, John Beaton could not wait to give it. I'm just glad that VAR actually worked in that instant, yes, and overturned it. But as I think I saw Cami Christie say last night, let's hope this isn't being used as a incident to praise VAR when really it should be used to criticise what is a terrible refereeing decision.
Yeah, and that's the exact point that I had on it as well. I was in the Jerry Kerr near the other corner flag at the opposite end of the pitch, and even I could see that even if it did strike a hand, his arms were so close into his body that there was nothing he could do about it. So the fact that Beaton, who was, well, by time, like you say, stumbled into the penalty box to point to the spot, was about 5 yards away from it and couldn't come to that conclusion himself. A little bit concerning, but yeah, if it's somehow used to show how good the sort of VAR has been for the weekend, then God help Scottish football.
Yeah, I don't kind of get how he was so quick to give it. As I said, especially when I've never seen a referee falling over and award a penalty at the same time. It was quite spectacular, but that's, I guess, how you could sum up most of John Beaton's refereeing. And of course, we also saw, what was that, injury time when Polvara gets pushed over. I've never seen a player pushed and booked for diving. That, honestly, I don't know what he was on yesterday. And I think as well that was, I saw Connie McLaughlin interviewing Jimmy Talleen and, referencing some of the booing that was kind of coming from the Aberdeen support. I don't actually think a lot of the booing was towards the team, in my opinion. It was aimed at the refereeing performance. But as much as we could sit here and criticise some of the decision making from John Beaton, he's not the reason we lost that game yesterday either.
Yeah, no, like I say, he didn't have a good game. The should have obviously given the foul to Polvara, but as I've seen everybody saying on Twitter, it's not John Beaton that's defending our 6-yard box. So I think Jimmy, which is another thing that I've enjoyed about him on this run as well, he's not really put blame on anybody else. He's not been quick to blame officials, even if they have had shocking games. And I think, again, it's just kind of a testament to his character, that he appreciates the fact that mistakes are made, and we need to improve that, or we will continue to concede goals in that manner.
Yeah, and he couldn't wait to scold Esther Sokler as well, who was hauled down mid counter attack. And obviously Esther was looking to complain to the referee. And John Beaton stopped the game, called Nicky Devlin over and basically told him to calm down because he's in charge. But yeah, it just felt like another game that was kind of a little bit getting away from John Beaton. And then a lot's also been made about, well, I know Jim Goodwin was very vocal after the game about some of the objects thrown, which, I mean, I don't know why someone was throwing a bottle of vodka onto the pitch in the first place, but that bottle of vodka couldn't have been further away from Jim Goodwin if he tried. I don't even think he was standing in the dugout at the point. So again, just feel like he was just trying to, make an example. And the thing that kind of frustrates me most about those couple of incidents, I should say, is the fact that Dundee United have already kind of limited our tickets for this fixture. What would frustrate me more is if we have incidents like that further restricting our ticket allocation for a game that is so much enjoyed by fans. And it was great to see from both sets of fans. A lot's been made about the fact that we didn't get the shed. Dundee United fans packing that out. It was a good atmosphere throughout. And if Dundee United, who would be probably perfectly entitled to turn and go, actually, you aren't getting certain sections of that stand anymore because we're not having objects rain down on our manager. It's not really the look that we want to have.
No, like you say, there's no place for it. Conversely, it just wasn't near a good win. Who might I add? I would have honestly respected it more as well. Like I say, being near the tunnel at full time. If he gave it big licks earlier on the touchline instead of till he was right into the tunnel, he gave us a little fist bump. So do better, Jim, if you're going to goad us.
Yeah, and he himself, as soon as Dundee United scored, just turned round and just watched the Aberdeen fans. He knew what he was doing in the first place as well.
Yeah, like if you're going to give it big licks, give it big licks. I'll respect it more. But yeah, I think it's well, even outside of the allocation, if Dundee were to cut our allocation down even further, I don't want it to be the end of the 5 o'clock weekend kickoffs either. Obviously this time a Sunday during the festive period, a little bit different to a Saturday, but if anyone's like myself and we're off today, you fair enjoyed your Sunday evening. But I don't want to see it be the end of that as well, because I also don't want it to become this sort of alcohol debate once more about can football fans be trusted by beer. So yeah, a little bit disappointing at some of the antics, but I thought for the most part, like you say, the atmosphere was good. There was no sort of trouble when I was going to or from the ground, apart from trying to get into the Jerry Kerr, which we'll maybe come on to discuss.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that I think by and large, as you said, the crowd in general was good. The atmosphere was good. We were behind the team, but I have never seen an away end or a stand in a condition that is not fit for a big game as the Jerry Kerr. Honestly, what a shithole. And I mean, that's being kind in terms of describing it. Trying to get into the ground pre-match was chaotic. The policeman at the one turnstile that was open at the Jerry Kerr kept saying to the steward, "You're in control, not the fans. Remember that." And this steward couldn't care less. He was so far out his depth. But I know you spoke about it. It literally was a free-for-all. And I remember hearing some guy shouted back at the policeman to say, "You've got to get some sort of control." He says, "There's folk getting crushed here," because everyone was just moving forward to try and get in time for kickoff. But the police either didn't want to know and the stewards couldn't care less. There was no kind of direction to put fans in. I've seen people say they could have put a couple of barriers at each turnstile to try and let fans in. Once you got into the ground as well, though, you could barely move trying to get to your seat in the Jerry Kerr.
Oh, it was brutal. Like I was saying to you before we went live, we ended up at one turnstile. The police had said if you move on down, it'll be easier to get in. Well, that was a lie. Moved on down, like you say, one turnstile open with everybody ramming in. 3 Police Scotland police horses didn't help the situation as they sort of then just crammed everybody in further. And then once you got in, you couldn't get moved on the stairs. How that place gets a safety certificate, I don't quite know. But yeah, just I should have probably known from that point it was going to be eye bleeding. But here we are.
Yeah, and then if you're over about 5'2", trying to navigate up the stairs to the stand or come down after full time is just not the one.
If you're like me and a bit on the wider variety as well, try to get through that bloody turnstile was a nightmare as well.
I actually couldn't even work out how to scan my ticket. I didn't realize there was a barcode on it. I was like, where does this go? So yeah, as you said, probably at that point you should have known it wasn't going to be a good day. You spoke about a point that Kevin Blanchard made as well, but Blanchy also speaks about the substitutions that Jimmy Tilleen made last night. And I do agree with Blanchy when he said kind of being surprised with them, because he goes on to say the game was screaming for Morris and Duke to be running at the defence and causing problems. mentioning Ryan Strain's booking early on and we didn't take advantage. Ryan Strain really didn't like the kind of personal attention he was getting from Duke, and I don't really think Duke was doing anything wrong. I thought Strain was very well protected by John Beaton in that matter. I just thought it was kind of two lads going after a 50-50. But the lack of Shaden Morris yesterday, I just didn't get because of the success that Duke was getting on one wing. Dundee United just didn't know what to do when we actually put the ball on the deck and ran at them. But you can't bring them on in the 90th minute and expect miracles. I didn't get it at all.
No, and I think that was the strange thing for me. I think Jimmy's always been quite proactive in his changes, and also quite reactive to the situation he's seeing unfolding in front of him. And I think the 3,500 Aberdeen fans in that stadium would have said to you, this is the time for sort of Duke and Morris to be getting a good run out here. So I was a bit baffled as to why Morris got left so late. Yeah, very, very odd one. Because like I say, it would have allowed us to stretch the game a bit more as well. Having Duke on one wing and Morris on the other wouldn't have been so one-dimensional. And I think that played into Dundee United's hands as well, because they just really knew to make sure they were doubled up on Duke's wing.
Yeah.
Because outside of that, we weren't really having much sort of positive outcomes on the game. So, yeah, bit of a strange one not to see Shady on earlier than what he was.
Yeah, and I think, it was quite telling that the support as well were singing for Shaden Morris. Not that just because we sing for a player means the manager brings him on. But I think, as you mentioned, like the fans could tell what was needed at that point. And as Paul Donaldson mentioned, even bringing Polvara on a little bit too late as well, just to give a little bit more fresh legs in the midfield. You could, Palaversa went down with, was it cramp or something at one point in the second half as well. So it just didn't seem to be that reluctance or urgency that we've seen previously to kind of freshen up in the midfield, which was a bit disappointing as well. And also in the second half, again, Paul Donaldson picking up on this, and I noticed it. I noticed it more because Mitov looked more frustrated at either himself or Duke when we tried to play a couple of long balls out to the left, but they were either getting held up in the wind or the wind was taking them. Yet we seem to persist with this kind of need to play it long, and the wind wreaked havoc.
Aye, yeah, it was sort of similar to the Hibs game. I found, we would, Rubizic or Malloy or whoever would get the ball, it would go back to to the keeper, and it would get punted into this swirling breeze. And after about 3 kicks, you're thinking, why are we still doing this? And it was very similar with Mitov on Sunday. You're thinking, if it's not worked the first time and it's not worked the second time, I don't know why you're continuing to try and go down that avenue. And I think, again, that kind of comes down to, I suppose, the need for the changes as well. Having the likes of McGrath continually going down the right, which wasn't working. I don't know why you would then just, to use an adage, keep on beating a dead horse, because it really just was getting us nowhere.
Yeah, and just some of the general tactics. Graham Gibbs speaking about, feeling like we were happy to hold them to 0-0. Substitutes seemed more to waste time than change the game. Sat next to Adam Irvin, and he said, at halftime, this game's got 0-0 written all over it, but would you take that? And I think the problem was, I think if you said at halftime, would you take it? Most of us would have said no, given it was an opportunity there to go and grab second place and potentially build on it this Thursday. Obviously, we failed to do that. I don't know. It was strange because even at goal kicks, we were passing it to Malloy and Rubizic, and just between the two of them until a Dundee United player kind of pressed, there didn't seem to be any sort of urgency. And the other thing that stuck out to me as well was when Rubizic had the ball. I don't know kind of roughly timing of in the game, but he went to turn and pass it back to Mitov, and the whole kind of stand, or certainly area around me, went, no! And he just put his foot on the ball, turned round, and actually carried it 10 yards forward. I was like, how are you needing half the Red Army to tell you what direction you should be travelling in here?
Yeah, no, that was I noticed that one as well. I think I was probably nowhere near you, but one of the conglomerates shouting no. But I think that's kind of been a bit of a common factor of this sort of winless run that we've been on. The urgency that we seem to have early on in the season seems to have sort of evaporated. And like you say, even the likes of Ruby, where typically we'd maybe try and get his foot on the ball and play in the midfield, he's kind of, again, I don't know if it's a confidence thing and he feels more safe going back to meet off, but he doesn't seem to have that same sort of, forward spark that he did give us. And where I thought that he'd really came onto a game. Um, it's something that I think needs to return for the county game. And like you say, it's a bit frustrating as well. It's another game where we've got the opportunity to capitalise on results going our way and we fail to. And it's one of those things that I think we've been crying out for because it's never something we usually get the luck of. Last season especially, if results went our way, we still wouldn't capitalise it. So. Hopefully 2025 is a new leaf for the Dons.
Yeah, I know, because obviously with the way that the results went on Boxing Day as well, obviously Rangers losing that game kind of kept us within touching distance of them. And then conversely, last night we were the last game, and that game at Fir Park ending 2-2, St Mirren dropping points after having beaten Rangers. It gave us that opportunity, especially with Dundee United. They could have, I'm obviously speaking pre-match, closed the gap to 3 points. We could have extended that to 9, gone into second. Now we've lost a point to second place. Dundee United have closed the gap to within 3. It's putting a lot of pressure onto a game against Ross County, which I don't think I'd have ever described the home game against Ross County as must win, but it kind of feels like that. But for those of a glass half full measure, we're going into 2025 2 points off second place, potentially starting the year in second place after the first round of competitive fixtures have taken place as well. And we're also in third, 3 points, so the destiny of third place remains in our own hands as well. So as much as we are frustrated, disappointed, unsure what the hell's going wrong, the league table is still offering us some sort of comfort, but it could be more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, our good run at the start of the season's really kind of given us that sort of safety cushion, shall we call it, where despite our current form, we're still in a position which we would have bitten your hand off for at the start of the year. I think Colin Gale made a good point on Twitter, I believe it was the other day, where he was saying we've still got a 52% win rate. This just looks bad because all the wins have came in such a concentrated period and they've not been spread over the 19 games we've already played.
Yeah.
Which I think is some really good perspective to have. If we had sort of had them scattered here and there on the run earlier, I don't think any of us would feel as sort of concerned as we are. I think it's then exaggerated as well because it now feels like we're on about week 6 of the podcast where where it's been a less positive episode than normal. But yeah, no, we're still in a position where the cards are somewhat still in our hand. They're slipping away a little bit, but we're somewhat still in the driver's seat of our own destiny.
Yeah, and as Skopsker also pointed out as well, we're the second top goal scorers in the league as well. So, if we can just sort that defence out, we will be okay. And right now, we're not scoring and we're conceding too many. So that's not helping our cause, which kind of takes me on to, I think we'll speak about January just now. We'll do that before we speak about Ross County. So I was speaking to Willie McPherson on Saturday, who he was actually taking in the Elgin Peterhead game. I think he's doing his own scouting report for the Dons. He's been taking in a lot of games over the festive period as well. And he did joke to me that the cup game is now becoming more of an oil slick rather than a banana skin, based on the way Elgin were playing, and conversely, so were we. But what he reckons is for January is that we need about 8 players 8 seems an excessive number for January. I thought he meant 4 in, 4 out. But no, 8 in is what Willie is looking for. Is 8 a reasonable number to assume that we need to look to change? I'm not saying we need to sign 8 players in January, but would you go along with that sort of number?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no doubts that I think we need to fluff up the squad a little bit. I think we are definitely light on numbers, and I think the recent injuries that we've had over the past few months have really sort of highlighted that. But at the same time, I think eight's maybe a bit on the high side. I mean, especially if like I say, if we're isolated down to January, I think you're probably not looking at more than maybe 4 or 5 players coming in. It's a window that's notoriously not one where you sort of do a big rebuild like you would in the summer. And even then, getting 4 or 5 quality players in January whilst you're being Aberdeen is kind of tough. Not a month we've got a good track record in. But also, I think for me, and I think it's an issue across the league. It's not just an Aberdeen issue. I think it's kind of been not concerning me, but sort of lack of youth that have been given an opportunity as well. Especially on this run where okay, you don't want to put that pressure on a young lad's shoulders to dig us out of a rut. But if things aren't working, why not put in a Fletcher Boyd, let him see what he can do. So I mean, I think as much as we do need signings, I think we could bolster our squad with what we've already got at home, basically.
Yeah, I know. I did kind of was having a discussion with a Hearts fan, and he was saying about how their season is maybe going to be saved by a 17-year-old, and I was like, oh, it sounds familiar to us, say with Fletcher last season, but we've not seen Fletcher, we've not seen Alfie Stewart. Maybe players that were on the periphery last season haven't been getting much of a chance, which is maybe slightly odd, given, of course, Jimmy's kind of come with a reputation of developing younger players. But it could also be that the club currently sees, obviously, their pathways. I know the likes of Alfie, Finlay Marshall, Warren Lobban are all out on loan at various clubs across the Scottish professional leagues. In terms of players we've currently got as well, we've also got a number of players out of contract when it comes to the summer. Duke, Angus MacDonald, Jamie McGrath, Jack McKenzie, of course, has been well documented. Colin Gale highlighting both Jamie McGrath and Jack McKenzie, saying if they don't sign new contracts, he would move them on in January and get what we can for them. Is this going to be something that the club may have to consider this month? Sorry, next month, maybe this month for some of you listening on Catch Up, that we do accept bids in January for some of these players, especially when maybe the performances suggest their heads are elsewhere?
I think it's possible. I think it's something that you always look at. I think it's tough in the sense of maybe outside of this current run, they've been 2 of our better performing players. And if they do get back to that level and show that they are willing to put the work in and regain that sort of form, then there's no doubts they're great assets to have. But at the same time, I don't think the world's going to fall apart if we were going to lose them in January, especially if we did look to have replacements lined up to come in as soon as possible. I think the main thing for me looking at January is just getting stuff done early. There's nothing worse than waiting and waiting and waiting, and it coming at the end where they maybe can't have that instant impact we want them to.
And I think as well, when you look at the fixtures coming up after the Ross County game, and look, I'm not trying to disrespect Ross County, but that is a game that we should be winning. It's really not a game we should be kind of speaking about with any sort of fear or trepidation. But after we host Ross County, we travel to Fir Park. Motherwell are on fine form. We then have Hearts at home, a trip to Ibrox, a trip to Elgin in the Scottish Cup, as we've already spoken about, and then St Mirren at home. It is a tough run of fixtures in what is a tough month where we could have players coming and going and trying to integrate them into the squad. It's difficult for any manager, especially a manager who will maybe be feeling some pressure given the recent run of results?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, even like you say, Ross County is a game that I don't think we should have too much fear about. But the sort of run that they've put together, coming in at a little bit of form themselves, it does make it a game where you look at it and go, this could be a sticky game, especially if the weather stays like it has today and it's another miserable day at Pittodrie where the weather takes effect. But it's a tough old run. I think it's really going to sort of highlight, Jimmy's management skills, which, I don't think any of us have any doubts are very good. But I think how he deals with new signings coming in, but also the club's sort of model as well. Obviously, new head of recruitment in there. It'll be interesting to see if he's got anything lined up, any markets he specialises in. Obviously, there's been the rumour of the Latvian captain, I believe it's Tobers, potentially having some interest from the Dons. So I think it'll be an interesting month to see how, if there are new signings coming in, how they do get integrated, and whether we do start to see a little bit more of Jimmy's style that we sort of got glimpses of early on.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the weather as well. Adam's dad said to me yesterday, I would just like for once to enjoy an Aberdeen game not affected by the bloody wind, because it seems like every game is affected by wind just now. But having a look ahead to Thursday's forecast, it's not going to be windy, but it's going to be bloody cold. Temperatures of 1 feeling like -4 with sleet showers come kick off on Thursday. So, I can't wait to be back at Pittodrie for that on Thursday. Nothing like starting the new year in a cold Pittodrie. But yeah, I think, when you speak about January, it's as you're rightly saying, it's a tough month to deal in. We don't have the best record of signing players in January. We're trying to both think of success stories from what we signed. We never actually got to the bottom of whether or not we signed Adam Rooney in January or not. But the only one we could definitely agree on so far was Shea Logan as probably being the last success from a January signing, which shows how difficult a window, probably one it is. I just wonder as well with the Scandinavian leagues, maybe Ireland as well, given that's where we signed Gavin Malloy from, with them being kind of summer leagues and kind of maybe just finishing, is that maybe a market we maybe look into in January, because it's going to be leagues and players that aren't actively playing or maybe not have as much interest around, certainly like we see when teams are currently playing and get that sort of form. So lots to kind of keep an eye on. But as you mentioned, with the Latvian captain being touted, it's good to see we've identified one area. I'm not saying he's going to be the savior to our defense, but we need to be getting our targets set and put in place. And I guess as well, when I mentioned about the likes of Jack McKenzie, and if an offer comes in, do we accept it? We'll probably need a left back to be signed before we accept that, because again, with Jimmy McGarry and his injury concerns, we don't want to be letting Jack McKenzie go and then not have a left back for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and it's exactly that, and it comes back to that wider issue, I suppose, of squad depth, like you say. Really only McGarry, and I think if McGarry falls, I think we're then maybe down to young Brendan Hamilton to to step up from the youth team.
Well, he needs to come back from locals first and foremost.
Well, exactly. I don't think we've really got much else as an out and out recognised left back. So, I think it'll be an interesting month, to say the least, both on and off the pitch.
Gives us plenty to talk about, at least.
Exactly. Hopefully, Callum will be back with scoops by then as well.
Oh yeah, he loves nothing more than transfer talk. I'm sure that'll entice him back onto the pod. Right, let's look ahead then to that game against Ross County. As we've already discussed, Nielsen suspended, so straight swap then for him and Graham Shinney coming back into the midfield. Any other changes you'd be looking at?
It's a tough one. I think, personally, like we've said already on the show, I think Topi out on the left, and one of Duke or Morris out on the right for me, and probably Clarkson in the 10. I think I would maybe drop McGrath for this game. Not only his performance has dropped a little bit. I think probably just giving him that rest as well, between Sunday and Thursday, could hopefully do him a little bit of justice. But yeah, I think a midfield three of Palaversa, Shinnie, Clarkson would be where I'd be looking to go. I think that would maybe balance us quite well to counter quite a feisty Ross County midfield.
Yeah, I missed this comment coming in from Forbes McFarlane about Kevin Nisbet, kind of asking, is he going back to Millwall in January? Obviously, we've had no word that may or may not happen. Maybe get an indication when we see the squad announced on the game on Thursday, and that might obviously decide who we play up front. And Pape shouldn't be that far off a return as well. For me, in terms of the midfield, obviously, hearing what you say, I do agree. I just don't see how we can play McGrath and Clarkson again after what we saw last night. Again, I understand what you're saying about, maybe looking to protect the likes of Tope. Does Duke come back in? But what's up with Shane and Morris? Is there maybe a little injury there? Because we've not seen much of him. It just didn't make sense how he only got injury time yesterday. I'm not saying he's got to come in and start, because I think we've all agreed he's probably got better impact off the bench. But I would actually just like to see us have out-and-out wingers, not Jamie McGrath in there for the sake of Jamie McGrath being in there.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think it does just come down to the fact that he was so good early on in the season. I think, like you've used the term already, he's kind of been shoehorned in there. I think because it was almost impossible to drop him at times. But yeah, no, in terms of Kevin, I think it's going to be entirely dependent on the new manager. I'm not sure if Alex Neil's been actually announced or whether he was just the sort of front runner for the Millwall job, but. If it is Neil that's in the dugout for Millwall, then you would be almost inclined to think Nisbet may go back, just with the fact that he probably knows him, obviously knows the Scottish League. But yeah, I think that'll be an interesting point that will sort of knock on our wider January business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in terms of, I know I've said this shouldn't be a game that we have any kind of fear or trepidation over. A game against Ross County at home is a game that we should be going into with as much confidence as possible, regardless of the run of form. But we have to obviously acknowledge the run of form Ross County are in themselves, picking up their first away win in over a year by beating Dundee, and then following that up with a pretty remarkable late comeback at home to Hearts, grabbing a 2-2 draw. So as we lose a game in the 94th minute, Ross County grab a precious point in the 99th minute. How much do you think both teams are going to be affected mentally by the respective late goals in their games?
Well, I think it's massive. Football's a game that momentum plays a huge part in, and I think the sort of the comparable runs will, it will definitely g up Ross County. Whereas it was maybe at a stadium they were looking to come to and think, oh, this might be a little bit of a tough run at it, and we'll be quite happy for a point. I've got no doubts that Don Cowie's probably now looking at this and going, this is probably the best time for us to go and beat Aberdeen when they're sort of, almost down for the count. So, and I think they've got, I think they've built actually quite a good team at Ross County. There are a few players there that have kind of, when I've been watching sports scene, quite like the look of. Obviously, they've got Josh Nisbet, who seems to be scoring more from holding midfield than his namesake Kevin. For us, and obviously, like Ronan Hale and Jordan White can always be a little bit of a pain in the arse when it comes to being goal scorers. So, yeah, hopefully though they're all going to be quite quiet and it'll be a routine victory for the Reds. But I'm not holding my breath at the moment.
No, and again, it's looking set to be another decent crowd at Pittodrie, which again seems to be very much the case from what we've seen. We've got Section R again for this game against Ross County, and only really in section X and Y is there 3-figure amount of seats left across the stand, actually, sorry, apart from the upper deck. So once again, ticket sales looking very good. Again, kind of expect that at this time of year. But how much do we need to be proactive, to quote Graham Gibb against Ross County? He says, pick the best 11, play at a high pace, don't let County slow the game down with constant interruptions. I mean, that last part's easier said than done. I think, though, it is really imperative that we do set the pace from the start and set the tempo. And, I mean, ideally, get an early goal.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think we've really got to take the game to them early. I think that's where you're looking at maybe the likes of Tope and Duke, if they're both in from the start, to really sort of utilise their pace and really get us dragged up the pitch and playing majority of our football in the county half. I think as well, it's just start shooting from the 18-yard box. Another one from me, I think, going back to that Dundee game, only 9 shots compared to United's 19. I'm pretty sure at least about 6 of those 19 from United were stingers from the edge of the area. And we've seen it from Tope. He's got it in his locker. Clarkson has it in his locker. We've got players that are capable of taking shots on. So yeah, quick start, take the game to County, play at a quick tempo, and try and stay on the front foot as much as possible. Because I think, again, part of this run that's kind of been a frustrating thing has been almost been on the back foot for the majority of it.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's it. And what would really be nice is if we could start the year with a complete 90-minute performance as well. That would be another rarity as well. But I think we do have to keep on that kind of positive mindset. And I think there was a couple of comments Ian Taylor had mentioned about the game being a must win. Considering our run after County, Motherwell and Rangers away. He says it's a must-win or the 3-year project could be on very thin ice. I think calling the 3-year project on thin ice after, no win in 8 now, I think it is, I don't know, personally, I think it's a bit too much right now. There's going to be other fans that agree. I know we went on to reply to Lee Ross. I don't know if Lee's actually watching tonight. Or not. I know he sometimes comments along. Ian did say that it's football at the end of the day is a results-based business, regardless of the club saying it's a 3-year project or not. I just think we've probably invested too much money into this project to not afford Jimmy the time, and he's yet to have his second transfer window. Largely what he's operating with is a squad that's failed under previous management as well. So does it maybe say more about the squad rather than the manager?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like you said, I know it's been a frustrating run, but as we were saying earlier, for more of a half glass full perspective, we're still sitting in third. I think no matter the results might not be there at the moment, but we're not in any sort of immediate danger of those results having a negative impact on the division we play football in, for example. So I think Jimmy's done more than earned the time to sort things out. Like you say, only having one summer window, which let's be really probably wasn't really too hands-on with anyway. So I think it'll be interesting to see the sort of players that are coming in January, where he's maybe had more time to sort of liaise with the ever rotating head of recruitment we seem to have.
Yeah, the revolving door of head of recruitment rather than the revolving door of players. No, I think that's fair as well. Like, look, we are going to get frustrated when things aren't going our way. Willie also said as well about, because I'd said to him that Kilmarnock game was up there with some of the stuff we'd seen in the Jim Goodwin era. And he'd said about the fact that Jim Goodwin never put us on a pedestal before dropping us from the height. And, again, it becomes when you're the victim of your own success, the start that we've had, ultimately, when you then go from title winning form to relegation form in the space of a couple of months, people are going to want to then start questioning the manager, questioning whatever they can choose to. But as we've said, we're sitting in third place, a couple of points off of second. We've given ourselves that platform to build, which hopefully we can do in terms of building a squad and hopefully starting with some results as well against Ross County to, get that momentum and get us back in that upward trajectory again. And I'm sure we'd all love to start 2025 with 3 points.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the main thing. As much as I'm wanting this complete 90-minute swashbuckling 5-0 performance, at this point, I'll take a scrappy 1-0 win just to get 3 points back on the board and start moving in that upward trajectory.
Yeah, a Jack Hamilton own goal to win it 1-0. Absolutely take that. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you very much also to everybody that has joined us live on the podcast tonight here on the YouTube channel. Remember to leave a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and comment your thoughts down below if you're watching on catch-up as well. Thank you to all of you who have interacted throughout the show and followed the show throughout 2024. It's definitely been a roller coaster, but we're just going to keep riding it, and we'll ride it into 2025 for hopefully a positive start against Ross County. So I hope you all have a fantastic new year, and myself and Phil, and hopefully Cam too, we'll see you in 2025 for lots more Dons content. So until then, we'll see you then.